Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Kelly Barner, and Kim Winter with you here today on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. So today's show is the latest installment of our Dial P for Procurement, very popular series that's presented jointly with our friends over at Buyers Meeting Point. Kelly, how you doing this morning?
I am doing great, Scott. I'm thrilled to be here, actually. And as people keep saying, I know we're bringing a lot of the Supply Chain Now audience sort of into the world of procurement. This is a fascinating time to be really in any field, but to be in procurement, it's great. So I'm glad to be having this conversation now.
Agreed. And, we've one-upped ourselves a number of different ways here. We've got our dear friend and special co-host, Kim Winter with Logistics Executive Group joining us from Dubai. Kim, good morning.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Doing wonderful, and really have enjoyed reconnecting with you. Kelly and I get to reconnect pretty regularly. Mm-hmm. And Kim, we never get enough Kim Winter. I really admire what you do and all the good stuff that you lead really across the globe. So a lot of kindred spirits there, Kim.
Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate it.
All right. So, but wait, there's more. There is more. So today is truly a global discussion on the wide world of procurement and really supply chain, and for that matter, global business. We've got a global business leader with us here today that we're going to introduce in just a second, so stay tuned. But two quick programming notes before we get started. First off, one of the many things that Kim does a great job at is interviewing business leaders across the globe on his podcast series on YouTube called Logistics Executive TV. So you're going to want to check that out and subscribe. Kim, what's one of your favorite conversations here lately?
Well, actually, Scott, we've been talking to a lot of people in Asia recently. There's the economy's hot in Asia, of course. So we've been talking to people right throughout the APAC region, in India here as well. And we've got a couple of conversations in Europe coming up as well. So very exciting. Some tough times out there at the moment, obviously, and India's top of mind at the moment. We're doing a lot of things around helping out in India at the moment as well.
Agreed. And on that note, be sure to check out the links to our listeners. There's a great relief project that we're helping to support, frankly, along with Kim and Kelly and everyone else that Vector Global Logistics is leading. So check out the link in the show notes there and get involved. And then secondly, you can find Dial P, the live stream, every third Tuesday of the month in 2021 at 12 noon Eastern time sharp, because Kelly Barner runs a very tight ship. And we always have great conversations there, right, Kelly?
Absolutely. We sure do. And a fabulous audience.
That's right.
It would not be the same without the audience.
Amen. All right. So on that note, but today we have one-upped ourselves. We've got a wonderful featured guest here today. I want to welcome in Sam Achampong, Regional Head and General Manager for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, perhaps better known as CIPS. Sam, good morning. How you doing?
Hi, Scott. I'm good. How are you?
Doing wonderful. I've enjoyed, all of us have enjoyed the pre-show conversation, which was wide-ranging, a number of subjects. And then, of course, I enjoyed meeting you initially a couple months ago, thanks to Kim Winter's kind introduction. So we look forward to diving deeper into your perspective and journey here today.
Yeah, let's go for it. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the introduction. And Kim, I know very well. He's in my neighborhood. So yes, of course, we're kindred spirits and in the same industry, which is good.
Wonderful. And we're going to talk more about Dubai, the incredible market that is here momentarily. But Kim, where are we starting with our dear friend Sam?
Well, Sam, salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Kim.
Great to see you, Sam, and it's been good to catch up with you again recently. I think we both ran into each other, 13, 14 years ago when you first came to the Middle East.
Yeah, and that welcoming Aussie voice that I thought would be a familiar accent I'd encounter when I came to the Arab world. Was very welcome when I first met you. So, and we've kept in touch since then, haven't we?
We have, and it's been good to bang into a few events over the years, and whether we've been speaking or hosting them, and then we'll talk a little bit about the CIPS events, which are very high profile here in the Gulf. So I'm sure we'll discuss that a bit later on. But look, let's just jump into it as part of the Supply Chain Now tradition. We always like to talk to people about their upbringing, right in from the get-go, where you came up out of school, even early life, and how the journey started for you. So, floor is yours. Enlighten us.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, going way back, obviously, giving away my age. But no, I grew up in a place called Tottenham, which is in North London. It's people will recognise the name because it's the hometown of the greatest football team in the world, as everyone knows, Tottenham Hotspur or Spurs. So the chuckle suggests that we don't all agree, but as far as I'm concerned, we are the best. So that's where I grew, and I'm got 3 siblings, 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister. I'm the youngest boy, so that can be either good or bad. But I think I was incredibly spoilt all my life by my mother, which is good. So I was kind of like the kid who could do no wrong, and I was very protected by my mum. I remember growing up, I was the kid who, if I went to stay with someone over the summer holidays, my mum would always tell their parents, right, whatever Sam does, you can't smack him. Just call me and tell me, but do not lay a hand on him. Now, I don't know if that's because she knew I was going to misbehave, but there you go. So I was always very well protected. But I think my parents were very high on the achievement side, on the education side. We really didn't have anywhere to hide if we weren't achieving. I think when I was about 7, I must have come second in a test at school one day and came home very excited about it, but she wasn't excited. She wanted to know why.
Wow.
I came second, so I kind of looked at my older brothers and they kind of went, yeah, that's how it is, so get used to it. So my parents are both from Ghana, which is in West Africa. So they're both from Ghana in West Africa, but they met both in the UK. Where they subsequently lived for the rest of their lives, and I think that's where some of the discipline and educational achievement attitude really comes from. So yeah, 2 older brothers, a younger sister. My brother has been an eternal expat all of his life. I never have been, but I'll go into it a bit later as to how I ended up in Dubai. But going through school, I wasn't particularly keen on the academic side. I was more into sports, football, and latterly taekwondo, which is kind of something I got into. But nevertheless, I wasn't allowed to be an average student. But having said that, I never had aspirations to get into procurement or supply chain. And actually, it's something that I'm still very passionate about changing, because that was many years ago, and actually still there isn't a natural route at undergraduate level for people to get into procurement and supply chain. It really is a big hole that we need to fill. So when I did start working, I worked for many years for an organization called Land Securities. So almost 9 years with Land Securities, and they are effectively one of the largest property companies or real estate developing companies in the UK. And I worked for them for many years in several different roles. And the division I was working with at one stage were dealing with a lot of government PFIs, or private finance initiatives, or private public partnerships, depending on where you are in the world, including involved in buying assets off the government and basically re-letting them to the government, but then managing them, the government and other large institutes such as the BBC, etc. So I was involved in a lot of the aspects of that initially as a project manager, and that after one particular project, the procurement team invited me to join the procurement team. You come into procurement, and that's how I ended up in the industry.
So I want to interject here for a second and bring Kelly Barner in. I've never gotten an invitation from a procurement team, so that's a pretty highfalutin thing there, Sam. Kelly, how you speak to that for a second, if you would? You being in the procurement world yourself, pulling in great talent like Sam that maybe when he entered industry, it wasn't procurement as he was speaking to. Speak to that for a second, Kelly.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, as Sam mentioned, there's not a natural, people might, whether they're in undergrad or in grad school, say, I want to work in finance, or I want to be in marketing or operations. There's really not a solid academic link between being in school and then getting into procurement and supply chain. And that has two effects. So it does make it harder for people to hit the ground running. But in a lot of cases, people just don't know that procurement is a job. And I think we're actually in a good place now, because it used to be, so there's push and pull for getting people into procurement. It used to be that procurement was where they sent you when they didn't want to see you anymore. That's where you put people so they couldn't do too much damage, so you didn't have to deal with them on other projects. But now, so I love your story about that, Sam, of being invited in. Procurement figured out along the way, hey, you know what? We need to start picking who joins our ranks. And so seeing bright lights of inspiration and hard work and creativity, regardless of someone's background, because it's not going to be in procurement, and saying, hey, come join us, come be in procurement. I think we've finally done a better job worldwide of making that switch, but it's very, very common to hear sort of strange stories of how people ended up in procurement. I got laid off, for instance. I got laid off from my other job and was put into procurement. So everybody has a story like that.
Blessings in disguise are alive and well. And we're going to talk about talent side later in the interview. But Kelly, let's keep driving with Sam's background there.
Absolutely. So Sam, you've talked a little bit about the companies and the projects, but let's think a little bit about some of the roles that you've held. What are a few of the roles that you've been in, or the teams that have worked on, that have gone a long way towards shaping the way that you approach the work you do now?
Well, that's a great question, because I think I've been lucky to have been on this kind of ladder that has gone in a sequential direction, and every experience has built on the other one. It hasn't been planned in that way, but it's worked out quite well. So, having a long experience working in land securities within one company, within the environment of one organization, it gave me exposure to several different experiences. So before I joined procurement, as I said, I was working as a project manager, and we're working on a number of PFI deals and actually procurement consolidation exercises. That's what the company were doing at the time. So one example was we owned a number of properties, probably maybe about 1,000 properties, and we were going through a security exercise in rationalizing the security spend, which in effect meant, right, you've got this amount of security guards. Let's work with a technology agency, CCTV, RFID, all the other technologies, and obviously what you're doing is you're rationalizing the personnel spend. So that was a project we were engaged in at the time, and so I was involved from a project management perspective, and then you had obviously the procurement team. So it was after that exercise that procurement pulled me in. So I then joined the procurement team, and that then gave me the background or the foundation from a procurement perspective to start working on different categories of spend. And because I'm working still within the same organization, I was able to get the very best grounding in procurement at that stage. I was able to become a member of CIPS at the time. I was encouraged to do that. I was encouraged to start my CIPS studies so that I understood the basics of procurement while I'm doing it. Which was the very, very best way to start. And by the way, now my eldest, my son, who subsequently gone into procurement, is also straight out of university, a fully qualified CIPS student, because I insisted he was, obviously, and that stood him in good stead. So yes, I have a kind of legacy of procurement in my family now. But
I love that. So, if I can call something out really quick, and Kim, I'd love for you to weigh in here. Awareness, which is one of the themes here at the early part of this conversation, is so important, right? Because we all have that blind spot. We all don't know what we don't know. And you never know when your purpose in life may be in that blind spot until you're made aware of what's involved. So Kim, speak to that for a second.
Yeah, well, that's it. And one of the interesting things about the event circuit up here in the Middle East and Dubai, and I've spent been commuting in and out of here nearly for 20 years, been here for the last year and a half due to COVID. But, finding that purpose and understanding what's going on, especially because in my life anyway, has pretty much been dominated by logistics and supply chain that my entire career over the last many decades. Finding out about, different elements of the supply chain has been really interesting. And Sam, you've really been a leading light in the entire industry up here in the Gulf. The 13 years you've been here, you've had a very high profile. CIPS is the most professionally run organisation across the landscape and ecosystem of logistics and supply chain here. Part of a very significant and structured organisation globally, of course. And the events that I've attended through your invitations that you've held have given enormous insight and shone a light on many different aspects of the supply chain, not just around procurement and supply. So I just think you've done a big job in that area. The professionalism of supply chain in general has been really championed by you up here. So well done.
Well, and along those lines, Sam and the CIPS group are probably providing awareness opportunities to a wide range of professionals to maybe uncover their purpose in life. So we're going to talk more about CIPS in just a minute, but Kim, that's a great call out. So Kelly, let's keep driving with those key roles, and then we're going to talk Eureka moments in a minute.
Yes. So, one of the things, and as I listened to you talk about how you got pulled into procurement, I think one of the things that might be easy for people to miss is how much heart you must have shown on that project. So just to kind of back up, because I'm 100% with you. I'm thinking, okay, I have a sense of why Sam got pulled in. So when you talk about a workforce rationalization project or a services rationalization project, basically what you're saying is that an amount of work was done by some number of employees or some number of suppliers, and somebody's asking, do we need to spend this much? Do we need to have this many suppliers? Do we need to employ this many people in this area?
Fun questions.
That is tough work. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the difference between coming to a task like that as someone from outside of procurement, simply approaching it as a qualified human being in the business world, versus maybe what you learned specifically from a procurement or a spend management or rationalization perspective along the way?
I think that's a great question, Kelly. And I think since I've been in procurement, one thing that's characterized procurement as a profession, or as from a knowledge perspective, is that look, it's not rocket science. And it doesn't need to be rocket science. And actually, I think looking back at that project, the majority of what I'm doing was not number crunching or anything along those lines, or report writing. It was more around influencing people. Yes. And stakeholder management. And that was the key to what I was doing, because we know what the end game is, and we know why we want to reach that end game. There's some commercial imperatives there. Mm-hmm. But you've got a lot of people involved here. And actually, there was an added complexity to this particular project, because the employees, some of them who you're talking about were government employees to a certain extent. And actually, you've also got unions involved. So it was complex. So the majority of my time was spent on the influencing side, the putting forward a good rationale, influencing people, and it took a significant amount of time. We're talking probably about
yes. Even after going through all that, you said yes, and you joined procurement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, I think I enjoyed it. It was dynamic. It was interesting. A lot of the project was centered around the second city in the UK, which is Birmingham, which is not where I lived. So it did involve, certain weeks actually going out there, being there for a week or so. So it just did demonstrate the dynamism of procurement, and it's not necessarily boring. You're solving complex problems, coming up with solutions, but also bringing people along at the same time, because without those three elements, you're not going to be able to put forward your solution. The soft side of that project and the soft side of procurement are the key sides. to it, and they're the fundamental sides. And I think even now I say to people that look, you cannot be a successful leader in procurement or a senior person in procurement unless you master the soft skills.
Yes.
Because if you master the technical skills, that's all well and good, but if no one's going to listen to you, then you're pretty much on your own.
Yeah. Any sort of eureka moments along the way where either you thought, okay, here's a completely new perspective on business, or when you thought to yourself, okay, you know what? I'm a procurement guy. I'm not just doing this for a little bit. I'm a procurement guy enough that I want to advocate for the profession. Any key moments along your way that jump out at you?
I think there have been a few because each role has been very, very different, and I think if I kind of characterize my journey in any case, so Land Securities was kind of my university, and then when I left them, I went into procurement consulting for an organization called Buying Force, and that put the icing of the cake on what I do, because that gave me this supplier relationship management skills that I didn't have. So that's kind of the ladder, and at that point, I guess I was as rounded as I'm going to be in terms of knowledge. And I went on my brother has lived in Australia for many, many years. He's actually Australian now, which is quite interesting. I always give him a dig about that. So he had lived in Australia for many, many years, and I'd never gone to visit him. Because it's too far, and Spain is a lot closer. But he was getting engaged at the time, and he said, "Look, you've got to come and visit me. You've got to come out and visit me." So this was kind of Christmas 2007. So I said, "Okay, great, I will come out this time." So I went out all the way out to Australia, went to visit him. He had his engagement there, and we had fun over Christmas. And then I was going to travel back, but I traveled to Australia via Emirates Airlines, and Emirates are quite smart because they kind of gave me a deal to say, oh, when you're flying back, when you stop over in Dubai, why don't you stay over for a couple of days rather than just transiting? And here's some vouchers for a hotel, which makes it kind of a third of the price and whatever else, and stay in Dubai. And I kind of thought, yeah, okay, why not? I'd heard of Dubai.
Saw you coming, Sam. They saw you coming.
They did, yeah, and that's and people have been saying that to me ever since. They saw me coming. So I kind of, Dubai is a place that I'd heard about. I hadn't made a specific effort to come out to, and this was great. Here was an opportunity to break up my 24-hour flight, or sorry, 12-hour flight, or whatever it was, to Australia. So I stopped over in Dubai for a couple of days and saw things, and I was in a taxi. Driving down Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main road in Dubai, 8-lane highway across the main artery of Dubai, and I kind of looked at all these buildings that were up, and they all looked almost as if they'd just been built yesterday. They're all brand new, and I've been working for Land Securities. Land Securities, as I say, biggest property company in the UK, building skyscrapers in London. But to do that, it's going to take you about 5 years just in consultation, or another 5 years in planning permission to put a tower up in the city of London. It's not a straightforward thing. To build it, it's probably straightforward, but to get all the approvals in place, it's not. So I kind of said to the taxi driver who was driving me along, I said, "Well, how long have these buildings been out here?" And he said, "Yeah, 2 years, 18 months, whatever." And I said, "How do they do it so quickly?" And he said, "Why? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, how do they get permissions? How do they get, the authority to do it?" And he said, "Well, no, if His Highness wants it to happen, it will happen." And I kind of thought that was kind of refreshing, refreshing kind of thing. And I thought, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So when I went back to the UK 3 or 4 days later, I kind of made it known to a few headhunters that I may be interested in moving to Dubai, and 3 months later, I kind of flew back out here with to speak to an organisation out here, and that was it. So in total, 6 months later, I was in Dubai. So that kind of that's what kind of brought me to Dubai. So I built up my procurement expertise, and look, in terms of maturity of a profession, Dubai or the Middle East was slightly behind where I was. So from here on in, it's all about imparting my knowledge. So I came out here to set up a procurement team for an organization called Unethical, who were almost the equivalent of land securities in Dubai. So I did that, and it's all about, again, imparting my expertise, putting a team together, that sort of thing. And I see all my subsequent roles in Dubai leading up to before I joined CIPS as following that same path. Going in, having a look at what an organization is doing, helping them set up the right structure for a procurement team or procurement or a process, and giving that knowledge and moving on.
So the Dubai market, the Dubai market is fascinating. Sam, you mentioned last time we got together, the future is East, and I've been sharing that quite a bit because it's really remarkable, regardless of the whatever the dynamic is behind it, what's taking place in the Dubai market. So what's your, I'm going to ask Sam and Kim momentarily, what's your favorite aspect of living and working and doing business based right there in Dubai?
I think, look, it's a fast-moving and fast-thinking environment. So it's almost like you've got a blank sheet of paper, and you can come up with the way you want to do things. Almost out of the box. Innovation is positively encouraged. There's no limit to how people think. When the thinking was going behind building the Burj Khalifa, it was all about, okay, look, here's a plan. We want to build a tower. And it's a case of, okay, how big is that tower? Is it the tallest tower in the world? Go back to the drawing board and come back when it is. So it's that kind of thinking that characterizes everything that's in Dubai. It's almost like there's no point doing it if it's not the biggest, the best. It's not. And the reason why I say the future is the East is because the mentality is not about replicating what other people have done. It's almost like leapfrogging what other people have done.
I love that. His Highness must have woke up one morning and saying, you know what? I want the tallest skyscraper around the world to be right here in Dubai. And kidding aside, I love not imitating and replicating, but finding that unique path forward. And you mentioned a second ago, there's no limitations to how people think, and that's a powerful concept, especially for solving the current challenges that we're being faced with today and moving forward. So Kelly, before I ask Kim what his favorite part is about Dubai, and Kim's, you're going to have a tough hurdle to jump over Sam's answer there. But Kelly, what was one of your favorite things you just heard Sam share?
Well, I was actually wondering to myself if possibly His Highness was the one that picked up the phone and said to the airline, "Get Sam." He may have individually plucked you out.
Maybe Kim tips him off.
Yeah. Recruiting. It's always recruiting. No, I mean, it's a growth mindset, right? And so whether it applies to building a city, or whether it applies to pulling people into your team, or whether it applies to how you approach what any business can do, I think it's very hard to learn a different way to think. You can learn different skills, and you can train, and you can have different experiences, but actually embracing a growth mindset, that is really tough. And it sounds to me, Sam, you can tell me if I'm right, it sounds to me like that seems to be endemic in the culture, in the people, in the country. And as seen by the huge buildings going up in Dubai, but I'm sure there are a lot of less visible ways that the growth mindset plays out there as well.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's led from the top. It's led from the rulers, the government, who really have this mindset to say we need to achieve this and we need to achieve it now. And over a very short period of time, the country is younger than me, which is interesting, and a lot younger than Kim. And so, since it was since its inception, didn't even have an international airport, and now it has the busiest international airport in the world, and some of the iconic operators such as Emirates. So it is that mindset of, right, we need to just go and do it, and we need to do it big, do it in the best way. do it in the best way rather than the way other people have done it before. And that's really characteristic. That growth mindset you mentioned, or the innovative mindset, is really what needs to be adopted, not just because of the pandemic, but across procurement and other industries anyway, because as we come to Industry 4.0, it is a case of having that growth mindset. If you're talking about digitalization in procurement, you're not building systems that replicate how you used to do things before. You're saying you have a system that enables you to do things. You don't need to go through the same processes. You can really leapfrog and take advantage of what you have in front of you. So that's what the growth mindset is. You know where you want to, you know where you want to go to, but you don't want to actually just go there. You want to go beyond that point, and that's what the growth mindset is.
Yeah, it requires
Love
a
that.
great deal of imagination and energy.
Agreed.
Vision.
And kind of throwing out how you were taught, some of the limitations, some of the blinders, some of the assumptions, so I really appreciate you sharing that. And so Kim, continuing on the special place that Dubai is, tell us your favorite aspects, and then let's roll right into CIPS.
Yeah, I decided ended up here about 20 years ago on the executive search side. It was the whole supply chain was developing here. If anybody's interested to see how the UAE and Dubai grew, go to YouTube and have a look at a time lapse. Just put time lapse UAE or Dubai, and it's pretty startling. And again, what attracted me here was the culture. Emiratis are extremely welcoming people. The leadership here, the royal family, the leadership, the major families here, extremely driven. They're driven by excellence, the digitization, and we talk supply chain in general and in broader economy. The whole of the UAE, of which there are 7 emirates, part of the union, and they're all driven in many cities within industrial cities, economic cities, food cities, digital cities around. I don't know, Sam, how many there would be here. But there's different zones, and they all have different classifications, and they're all specialized and everybody focuses in different areas of achievement. So that was what drove me here, Scott. And we set up business here 2004 under a license in one of those economic zones. We're still in that same economic zone, not far from where I am here at my home office, and in Dubai Studio City, which is the equivalent of Hollywood in the UAE, if you like, or in Dubai. But it's been an exciting place. The culture has changed. It's become enormously more cosmopolitan. If you want to see the old Dubai or the old areas of what this particular Emirates environment was like, you go up to Ras Al Khaimah or down to Abu Dhabi or to different parts of the Emirates, and you'll see all those different areas. But very, very explosive, dynamic construction, economics, broad-based, and the logistics and supply chain, absolute global hub, not only because of the major international airport, but also because of the sea lanes here, Jebel Ali, Abu Dhabi ports. Of course, there's massive organizations which have enormous reach into all parts of the world that are based here from headquartered here.
And it's a real melting pot. You're absolutely right, Kim. There's some quite interesting dynamics that I think a lot of people don't realize about Dubai, and one of them is that over 90% of the people here are expats. So that's that's an overwhelming number of people who live in the city or the country are actually not from here. Are not indigenous.
Your restaurant scene must be fabulous.
I
mean, Kim mentioned food cities. I'm thinking like there must be a million wonderful things to eat from around the world.
There are.
It is, and also something that is not obvious, that because it doesn't seem characteristic of the region, is that the UAE is actually one of the most safest cities or countries in the world in terms of crime rates. So for in terms of lifestyle and whatever else, to have a family, young kids or whatever else, it is just an incredibly safe place to live in terms of crime rates and general social interaction. So it's a fantastically great place to live.
It is.
I love that. Okay, so I feel like I've gotten a UAE certification in the last. Kim, I'm glad we recorded just that last 5 minutes, because that, clearly you have been there for quite some time, and clearly it is not only a melting pot, but a great connector city. Kind of, it feels like it brings a ton of industries and infrastructure, and of course businesses and innovation all together. So Kelly, I'm hearing a Dial P on scene in Dubai soon, really soon. So look forward to that. So Kim, we're going to dive next into the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, right?
Yeah, so Sam, give us a bit of a heads up and let us know. When I used to go to your conferences back in the early days when you first arrived up here, I went because I thought procurement, these guys, people, women, control the money. So follow the money. They've got the wallet. They're the people who do the spending. But of course, more I got to be at your events.
And he's exactly right. We don't need to debate what procurement means or why you should work there.
But I found out, of course, there was an enormous myriad more of complexity to procurement as a profession. So maybe you can just peel back the onion a little bit on the different elements that you guys talk about, and you have very good examinations and qualifications in that area as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it is quite interesting. I think I mentioned earlier on that in my first role, one of the things I was lucky to do was to become a CIPS member and start doing my CIPS qualifications. CIPS as the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, as you mentioned before, we've been around for a long time. So set up in 1932, so an awful long time ago. And I remember when I joined the institution, I wanted to know more about actually what sits behind being set up in 1932, et cetera, and so I did a little bit of digging with our kind of historians within CIPS, and they gave me the real deal on exactly what this institute is and how it's set up. And the key starts in the name, Chartered Institute. And what I found out was that Chartered Institutes, a very British thing, by the way, are institutes that are officially recognized by the sovereign, by the Queen, as being representative of a profession. Which means, by definition, that there will never be two chartered institutes in any particular profession. So, which means that if you become the Chartered Institute of a particular profession, unless you do something awful, then you're likely to keep that royal charter, all the time. And it was interesting when we were setting up our business in Dubai, and the officials were asking for, our kind of articles of association. Of course, CIPS as a Chartered Institute doesn't have that. What we have is a royal seal from the sovereign in a glass box. So it's still a very, very traditional setup to be a chartered institute. So, but also it has a lot of obligations. So, our obligations are to support the growth and development of the, as they say, the art and science of procurement and supply. So, we're not PLC, we're not an organization. We just have to prove every year that we are representing and supporting the profession around the world. So that becomes quite difficult. So CIPS wears a couple of hats. One, the primary one, is that we are a registered charity. And our company set up in our head office is as a registered charity. And then we put on the other hats, which are, we're an educational awarding body. And third, we're an advisory, we're a business advisor. So coming back to what we do around the world, we've been set up in 1932 in the UK, which means that's a very mature procurement environment. Then you come to 2011 when we set up in the UAE. That's where you're fulfilling that ambition to spread not the best practice, but the leading practice in procurement around the world. Because to a certain extent, for people who are not in procurement, there can always be a perception of what procurement is. And even organizations which have been asked to join and set up a procurement function, there's been different reasons why people have wanted to do that. Maybe they've had an audit, and the audit department have said, you need to set up a procurement function. What do you need to do that for? To control the spend, to control ethics, to make sure that all quotes are stamped. So people don't really understand, or to save money, to save 10% in spend every year. But actually, I think, as you said, Kelly, it can go further than that. And the best value you can get out of a procurement team is to allow them to align with your business strategy, and to be looking to identify and control inherent risks and ultimately be not a cost center but a profit center, because procurement should be able to pay for itself simply by the strategic value that they're adding to the organization, and also through the cost avoidance that they're adding. So there's many strategic aspects to procurement, from the way suppliers are treated to the way commercial risks or supply chain risks are handled, to ultimately make sure that an organization is reaching its bottom line ambitions and not just saving money on a short-term basis.
I'm actually interested to know a little bit more, Sam. So I did my homework. So obviously I know CIPS has its origins in the UK. In recent years, there's been a push to sort of build out in the US, or I should probably say North America. But CIPS, MENA, where you are, so Middle East and Northern Africa, you've got, is it 21 countries that are part of your sort of jurisdiction? I know probably at a certain level, a lot of the business is conducted in English, but there are multiple, even dialects of Arabic spoken as the primary language in those countries. When it comes to the community aspect that's associated with events or training or connecting professionals within the region, what is that like given the range of countries and then organizational maturity levels that you have among your immediate membership?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the strengths, I think, of the region, first of all, is the community. When I first came to the Middle East and I was employed in different roles, I was part of the community. There is a community. We all go to the events and we volunteer to speak and that sort of thing. So the community is really what drives and continues to drive the emergence of procurement in the region. But it can be incredibly complex. We've been talking about Dubai for a long time within this conversation, but Dubai is not even the capital city of the UAE, right? So it's an incredible, and Dubai as a city is chalk and cheese from Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the UAE, and is very different to Saudi Arabia, and it can be very different to the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. It's very different to Egypt. It's very different to Lebanon. So there are, as you say, myriad of different approaches and maturity levels of procurement. So it's very strategic that we're based in Dubai, because I guess it's the biggest hub where you can get the biggest traction in terms of people being on similar pages. But yeah, the way we approach the community and the imparting of knowledge across the different areas is to have what we call a branch community. So within the MENA region, as defined by the CIPS map, which is 17 countries, including Pakistan, but we won't go into how we've done that. But but anyway, what happens is we have what we call branch communities in countries across the region. So we have what we call a CIPS branch we have 3 CIPS branches in the UAE, we have 3 in Saudi Arabia, we got 1 in Lebanon, 1 in Egypt. And what happens there is these are professionals, but also volunteers who understand their own local environment, the maturity of procurement, what's needed, what the priorities are, and they pretty much run the community on a voluntary basis in all these countries. Supported by us, they will facilitate the local branch events, the conferences, the webinars, and with our support, because they know what is the priority. And the priority for procurement and supply chain in Egypt is very different to what it is in Kuwait. So we allow them to give us that knowledge, and we support them as much as we can. So they lead it. And the success in that means that you've got local people who are waving the flag, speaking the right language, and speaking to the right people. And as a result of that, you'll find in some countries in the region now, CIPS qualifications are actually sponsored or paid for by the government. If you go to Bahrain or Saudi Arabia, people who take CIPS qualifications at the entry level, fully funded by the government, because the volunteers have lobbied for that, and the authorities have seen value, and they've come on board.
That's wonderful. Investing in your workforce in these key areas of the craft. So that's great to hear. All right. So Kim, beyond all of that great value proposition that CIPS presents, they also do a lot of good work in the world, right?
Yeah, you guys are involved in a whole lot of initiatives, Sam. I've seen you guys lending your support to a whole range of different activities, being charities and also economic and humanitarian activities around the Gulf. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have the CIPS Foundation. CIPS Foundation is the specific charity arm of CIPS, an integral part of the organization from the center, and that looks after a couple of things. It's there to support individuals who do not have access financially to an education, and if that education preference is in procurement and supply, then we're here to support them. So we support a number of students around the world, on a bursary basis, in areas of the world where they cannot afford that, and we've evaluated that it's useful to them. So that's what the foundation does. It provides bursaries, but it also supports procurement or supply chain related issues, problems or projects in different parts of the world, where either donors or applicants have applied to us through the foundation for assistance, and we can provide either practical help or whatever help is needed as far as we're able to help those projects go through, and that can go as far as helping provide water in a part of the world, or a village in a part of the world that hasn't got it, from a supply chain point of view, working with local people who have come up with the project, to sponsoring someone who has to walk 20 miles a day to school. So the work of the foundation is wide ranging, but on top of that, I mean, as an organization, we've always worked with a lot of the global NGOs, from whether it's the World Bank or the UNDP or UN Women, on different projects around the world, and the most recent one being the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we work very closely with them on a project to build up healthcare procurement knowledge in Africa. So that project started about 3 years ago. So we kicked off in South Africa, subsequently now in Nigeria, and after that we'll move to Kenya, where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are providing the kind of funding for it. We're providing the actual knowledge and training and advisory side of that. So that's a partnership, another partnership that we have. So as an institute, that's one of our primary requirements as a chartered institute, to represent the profession.
Love it. And I love how y'all put at least one aspect of your mission. You're kind of speaking to it, quote, to improve people's lives through better supply chains, end quote. I love that. And I love the action behind it, most importantly, Sam. Okay. So from here, I tell you, there's so much, an hour does not do Sam justice here, but Kelly, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the craft itself of procurement, right?
We are, yes. And as I said when we opened, I'm obviously not objective, but I think this is a fascinating time to be in procurement and supply chain. So Sam, as you have conversations with, whether it's your local community there in Dubai or whether it's out through all of the different branch members, what are sort of the top topics that you're hearing discussed, either with the greatest amount of urgency or most frequently, regardless of where folks are?
I think, look, COVID, the pandemic, has focused people's mind and put a big spotlight on procurement and supply chain. So, there's a bigger focus on what we do, what we can do, what people think we can do, what people think we should do, rather. So that's what's front of mind from a kind of reactionary point of view. How can we deal with supply chain risk? How can we deal with shortages, escalating prices, lack of suppliers in certain areas, lack of commodity, local sourcing, sustainability. Those are the kind of things. But I think if we put the pandemic to the side and assume that that's very reactionary stuff, I think the digitalization of procurement was front and center. You know, before the pandemic happens and continues to be, it's clearly known that for procurement practices to be aligned with, you know, Industry 4.0 is the only way to go, and if people don't, they'll be left behind, because you can't go half into something like digitalization, because it involves re-engineering your processes, the way you think, and, you know, things like big data mean you've got a more strategic mindset. So digitalization is definitely the biggest, after supply chain risk has reared its head. It's definitely the biggest subject. But there are other areas. I mean, ethics is a huge thing in procurement at the moment. And which is why at CIPS we've developed what we call the ethics test, which we ask all our members to take every year. I actually did mine yesterday. It took me 2 days to do, but that's a whole different subject. But because that's so important. I mean, the cost of unethical behavior is a commercial cost. You know, it adds 10% to the cost of doing business around the world. At the very least, I think we're talking kind of 10% of GDP. The world's GDP is eroded by unethical behavior. So ethics is a huge subject, and part of ethics is of course sustainability. You know,
Yes.
the triple bottom line. It's not just about you know, profits. You got, you know, people and planet are absolutely fundamental, because now consumers are actually talking with their feet and jumping on board sustainable companies. So there's no more excuse not to do that. It's a commercial imperative to adopt sustainable practices. So those are big subjects, and on the bottom of all of that is capability development. So, you know, the number of organizations and CPOs who are saying, great, yeah, we need procurement people, but we cannot find enough good or brilliant people. And that's interesting, because there's a lot of procurement people around, but I think people are seeing that it's quality more than quantity now.
Yes.
You need real strategic thinkers, people who are looking far beyond, you know, the reduction in price on a transactional basis, but looking at the value add to the bottom line. So that's what I'm hearing. And interestingly enough, people are asking, you know, has, from a procurement perspective, has the thinking of the industry or the industry practitioners changed since COVID? I hear that quite a lot these days. You know, what are you going to change now that you've seen what's happened in COVID? And it's such an interesting question, because I've thought about it quite a few times, and I've answered the question a few times, and I honestly think the only thing that will fundamentally change in thinking around procurement and supply chain professionals is probably the whole just-in-time concept. That's probably the only thing that people may even think, but you could also argue that, you know, just in time wasn't a pure procurement supply chain concept, but that's a whole different subject. But everything else really is reinforcing best practice. You know, where people had single sourcing before, well, you know, no one ever advocated single sourcing. You know, where people have not had the correct relationship with their suppliers.
Yes.
Well, you know, the advocacy has always been around treating your strategic suppliers in a strategic way, and all of these things are what have come out of COVID. You know, people who have fallen foul of the economic conditions of COVID have been because they have not been as sophisticated in risk management, in supply relationship management, and all the other areas in contract management. You know, when people talk about force majeure, it's a bit late to talk about force majeure after a pandemic has just hit. You know, that sort of thing. So these are all things that you could have mitigated against almost, and it's not something that we kind of need to go back and think, oh, right, okay, should the thinking have been more focused on force majeure, contract management, supplier relationship management? It always was. It's all about the adoption of these best practices.
And so maybe one last quick procurement question, then I'll give somebody else a turn. You know, obviously CIPS is focused on skills development, right? Capabilities, training. But as we discussed when we were hearing your story, there's a piece of it that you can't train into people, and whether it's an innovative mindset or creativity or the heart, like I said, that you clearly must have exhibited on that project to be pulled into procurement. You know, personally, when you look at the people that are coming into the space, what are you seeing as the priorities, in the area of literal skills development versus maybe looking at the way people think or the personality traits that they bring to the work? What would you say kind of on that balance?
It's all about the soft skills, and if you look at the top 10 skills maybe you need as a procurement professional in this day and age, then the soft skills are at the top rather than the bottom. So that's what's been the shift. You need to have that emotional intelligence. What we say is digital industry 4.0, where AI meets EI or something along those lines, I heard. But essentially it's the soft skills are on top. If you're able to have those influencing skills, those stakeholder management skills, the rest of the stuff can come on board. Because, for example, people talk about negotiation being a key skill of procurement professionals, and it is. But I had a round table recently, and I just threw it out there and said, guys, look, if at this stage of your career, as a senior procurement professional, if you don't know how to negotiate, you know what? Don't worry about it. You don't focus on it. Yeah. Don't worry about it, because if there's one thing that can be substituted, it's that. You got eSource and your ERPs, whatever else. But if you don't have the soft skills, that can't be replicated. That can't be replaced. So it's almost those are the key focuses. And actually, I think you mentioned in terms of what CIPS does. So the reason we have a regional office is to work a lot with on a B2B basis, and the B2B basis doesn't always, when we're working with other organizations, doesn't always just include the qualifications and things along those lines. It involves a lot of advisory work. We work with lots of organizations about not how their people do procurement, but how they do procurement. How they set up, what is the structure of procurement, what are the policies and procedures, what do they do, how are they performing, where does procurement sit in the organization, how influential is it, how strategic it is. We work with a ton of organizations around the region on just that aspect alone, on how effective is your procurement function. Yeah. And then on the other side, when we work with people, a lot of what we do doesn't only focus on the technical aspects. A lot of it focuses on leadership. Stakeholder management is a huge module. Emotional intelligence is a huge module, as is ethics and accountability and things along those lines. So actually now, in terms of the weighting, the soft skills are at the top of what we teach, and the teaching style is very, very project based now. So it's more about oral presentations on what you just learned, rather than actually writing an examination. It's saying, right, you've just learned these 4 modules. Okay, translate that into a problem in your own organization. Yeah. Present that back to us and your boss, and convince us that you've actually taken away some core procurement skills.
Critical thinking is what, and ability to apply what you've learned there. I love that. That's some of the more powerful professional development programs and curriculum that I've ever been through. So, Sam, y'all are up to so much at CIPS, and it seems like you touched so many aspects of industry and so many different professionals where they are in a multitude of journeys. Folks just breaking in, to folks trying to move up and into the upper echelon, and folks that are looking for maybe to challenge their own assumptions they've developed over a couple of decades of being in industry, and beyond it all. You're doing a lot of good things and helping people, and that's we can't get enough of that in this year that we live in here. So huge thanks, Sam. I love what you and the CIPS team are doing. But enough for me. I wanted to get a key, as we start to wind the conversation down here today, and I still, Kelly and Kim, we're just scraping the top of the iceberg with Sam here, I know. But what's been y'all's favorite thing? And Kim, I'll start with you. What, out of all the ground that we've covered here today, what's been one of your favorite things that Sam has shared? Uh-oh. And in the infamous words of 2021, you are on mute.
Gotcha, Skipper. So, yeah. So, Sam, what I like a lot about what you guys are doing is all of the community activity and the strength of the brand that you've developed. And I've known a lot of CIPS organisations and execs around the world, Australia, New Zealand, different parts of Asia. So I think you have to take a bit of kudos and a bit of recognition for what's been going on up here the last 13 years since you arrived.
Thank you.
But from my perspective, really, I think one of the hot points for me is the fact that you've built the credibility of the brand, of the qualification to a level where, from us as a global executive recruiter in the supply chain space, CIPS is one of the few qualifications that will actually, from our perspective, tip somebody into a high-ranking position for a shortlist for a job. So I think, and especially in this particular market here, where you stand out, as I said before, as by far the most professional industry type organisation, chartered certainly, but also other industry associations. And also the way that can influence decision-making and careers. I mean, the next job for somebody may be one of the most important things that ever happens in their lives. So you guys have got a role to play there. So I think that's been really good, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Well said, Kim. Yeah. Kelly, what's been, out of all of the goodness that Sam Achampong has shared with us here today, what's your favorite?
Well, I'm lucky. I get to talk about procurement all the time. And one of the things that's a constant is change. We're always evolving. We're always transforming. We're always maturing. And I think having this conversation today reminds me why that's necessary. It's because procurement is such a big job. So much is asked of us on an individual level, at the company level, in the global community, regionally. There's an awful lot that we have to be able to do. And it does include everything from negotiation to ethics to supplier identification to rationalization to every single soft skill you can possibly imagine. It's a very big role, but that's what makes it so much fun. And that's what makes it so exciting. And that's why, I mean, I can't imagine, whether it's getting plucked out of somewhere unexpectedly or getting moved sideways into procurement. I would view that as a professional stroke of luck for anybody that has that experience. So we can just run this as like a recruiting video. It's a fun, exciting, challenging, messy, awesome, strategic place to work. There's no other place you'd want to be.
Well said. Completely agree, Kelly. All right, so I'm going to go around the horn, so to speak, and make sure folks know how to connect, not only with Sam, but also with Kelly and Kim. But Sam, starting with you. You got so much going on. But how can folks compare notes with you and get more information on CIPS?
Yeah, just contact me on LinkedIn, Sam Achampong. Contact me on LinkedIn. And if you want to know more about CIPS in general, www.cips.org is the place to go.
Wonderful. It's just that easy, Sam. And of course, we'll include a couple of those links in the show notes, so you're just one click away to our listeners to connecting with Sam and CIPS. Okay, so Kim, how about you and the Logistics Executive Group? And of course, we've talked about Logistics Executive TV, wonderful content out there on YouTube. But how else can folks connect with Kim Winter?
Sure, thanks, Scott. Hey, anybody can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm fairly big on LinkedIn these days. We put a lot of effort in communicating with our ecosystem, with our community, both from the executive search side and the corporate advisory, M&A, transformation side. So LinkedIn's a big one. Otherwise, logisticsexecutive.com. And I just want to get a plug in for the UAE here, even though I'm a resident of 4 different countries and tend to live all over the place. Not so much with COVID, but we've got Expo in the UAE this year, about October, I think it is, at Sam. The later in the year. Big event, and the borders are open. No quarantines coming in here. As long as you've got your PCR test, you can get in and out of the UAE, no problems whatsoever.
Love that, and really love your passion for all that you do, Kim. It exudes across your social. It really comes out and manifests itself in your interviews, and every time we reconnect, you're genuine and you're driven by helping others. So Kim, we don't get a chance to reconnect enough, and I admire what you do.
Scott.
Okay. I'm a big fan of all three of y'all here. I'm going to have a Sam tattoo and a Kim tattoo, and of course, a Kelly Barner tattoo across the back. But I really mean it. I mean, the three of y'all are, we deeds, not words, is what we try to live by here. And all three of y'all clearly are taking action to drive a better industry. And Kelly, finally with you, how can folks connect with you and Buyers Meeting Point?
Sure. So same as Sam and Kim, find me on LinkedIn. My web home is buyersmeetingpoint.com. And then of course, save the date. The third Tuesday of every single month from 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. Scott and I, the Dial P for Procurement live stream. That's probably the most fun way to get in touch with us.
Agreed. And be sure to bring your voice. Join us for the live stream, and then bring it. We really love hearing from folks across the ecosystem, as Kim put it, or the community. So, all right, we're gonna have to leave it here. We're gonna have to have Sam and Kim back with us to reconnect. There's so much going on, but in the meantime, be sure, and a big thanks to Sam Achampong, Regional Head and General Manager for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, better known as CIPS. Sam, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Scott.
And of course, my esteemed co-hosts here today, Kelly Barner with Buyers Meeting Point and Kim Winter with the Logistics Executive Group. Big thanks to both of y'all.
Thanks,
Scott.
everybody.
Okay, so folks, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation, this certification class, masterclass perhaps, as much as I have a ton of insights and knowledge and market intel on what's been covered here today. Big thanks for tuning in. Hey, on behalf of our entire team here, hope this finds you well wherever you are, and come visit UAE. We're gonna take Kim's invite up on that. So the future is East, as Sam has shared. But most importantly, folks, be like these three right here. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.